All right, we still got big questions this morning as well. And the big one is this. How far will Vladimir Putin take this as the invasion commences overnight? If you're just tuning in, the invasion of Ukraine has begun by the Soviet military. Let's get an answer to that question from Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired four-star General Jack Keane. General, first of all, waking up this morning, are you at all surprised by the scope and scale of what Vladimir Putin appears to have undertaken?
Yeah, well, I started to become surprised by it, days ago when it became obvious that he was going to select the most ambitious and most challenging operation here as part of his military campaign to take over Ukraine. In a sense, I mean, he is showcasing his military and his professionalism in a way the United States did during Desert Storm. He has selected the regime change option with hundreds of pre-assault fire targets, multiple axes of advance coming into the country, near simultaneous attack to collapse a regime as quickly as possible. And I think, Pete, look, when he went into Georgia, it's well documented that his military had lots of problems. It exposed more warts than there were positive things as a result of it. And even in 2014, he annexed Crimea, and there was really no fighting there. And then he went into eastern Ukraine. And in the lessons learned, they indicate that they relied too much on hybrid warfare and unconventional forces, and they weren't able to take all the objectives that they had in mind, and they should have relied more on conventional forces. And that certainly is the case that we're seeing here. What Putin has done, he's taken about 60% of his military and professionalized it. And it doesn't have much conscripts in it, and they're well equipped, they're disciplined. I've been looking at them closely as they're moving around. They seem young and fit. Their march discipline is very good as they move in convoys and vehicles. So this is a professionalized military, and he's sending a message about this in terms of the capability that certainly he has achieved here. I think, Pete, the strategic objective of what is driving him is really important, and that's simply, in my words, I mean, he has his own words of doing it, expressing it certainly, but it's pretty much the same. And that is, I mean, he's reconstructing the post-Cold War boundaries in Europe, and he really wants to take away NATO's dominance and alter the balance of power in Europe, and that's strategically what this is about. And when you consider, and you pointed this out, not just Ukraine, which he's going to occupy and install a new government here, but also Belarus is in his orbit, and this is very significant what is taking place. Operationally, I mean, excuse me, his political objective here is real simple, and that is install a new government. And that will happen.
He mentioned, General, to that point, he mentioned in his statement overnight, he said, we're not interested in, at the same time, our plans do not include the occupation of Ukrainian territories. And I'm interested because you mentioned, in this sense, he's doing it more conventionally. Would that mean a decapitation, installation of a puppet government, maybe not a full military occupation, instead something more limited? Because some have suggested, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, attempting to occupy Ukraine with the Russian army could become an arduous task and one that would begin to look not very successful for Vladimir Putin. So how does he balance that?
Yeah, well, there's certainly risks here for Putin, and that's one of them you're putting your finger on here. Yeah, he intends to install a government that is made up of Ukrainians that are friendly to him. He probably has in mind the model he had here once before under Yanukovych. And he was a Russian stooge in a sense, refusing to look to the West, refusing to look towards NATO, refusing to look towards the prosperity that could be offered to the people as a result of it. And guess what? The people threw him out. And that's another issue here that provides risk for Putin. And I think from the beginning, going all the way back to 2014, he has underestimated the Ukrainian people. You know, when he put those troops in eastern Ukraine and left them there, the so-called separatists, yeah. And he brought Russian troops in and out of there all the time over the last 8 years. He really expected that because of the threat of further invasion, that the people and the government would, even though it was an anti-Russian government that was in there post-Yanukovych, he expected that would shift towards the east, towards Russia. And the exact opposite happened. I mean, the people stiffened their will against wanting to be a part of the Russian orbit and really looking to the West for all the obvious reasons: open democracy, freedom, thriving capitalism, prosperity for their children, and an advancing way of life. All of those things is what they certainly wanted. And the Ukrainian people are going to be a factor here.
Yes.
The military objective is pretty clear, and that is his operational commanders have been assigned an objective to defeat the Ukraine military. And a lot of the pre-assault fires are certainly going at that in terms of military and government targets that are supporting them, but it's also the deployed military that's in the field to be defeated. They're going to be assigned key terrain objectives to seize and to hold as part of a military operation. That's routine. And then the last one is they're going to facilitate a regime change. And eventually that we will see that unfold, before our eyes. He's got a lot of options to deal with that. I'm sure he's got a set plan in play and how he intends to accomplish that. But he can call audibles in relation to that. That's what we see in front of us. And certainly the consequences of this for Europe, for the world writ large, because nothing happens in isolation anymore. I mean, obviously, as we have said so many times, Pete, what the result of the Afghan debacle, it had residual effects, emboldened our adversaries. We've seen it here with this incursion, and military, all full-out invasion is more accurate description. And this will have that kind of residual impact, too, and embolden the Iranians for sure as they're going forward and want to acquire a nuclear weapon and take the sanction money and fuel their objectives in the region. We know what that looks like as a result of the 2015 flawed deal. And certainly President Xi is looking at, while he publicly has not endorsed what Putin is doing, he hasn't condemned it either. They're talking about negotiations and a middle-of-the-road approach. But you can bet that he is looking at this, and what he sees is weakness in the West and how that can advantage him in terms of his national objectives as well.
Well said. I don't know if you heard what we were talking about with Benjamin Hall for a moment, General, but everything that's been tried so far from the West and from the White House hasn't worked. The idea was deterrence. He was not deterred. Sanctions have been ratcheted up. They haven't been effective. Strongly worded resolutions and statements not effective, from the UN to NATO to the G7. And then in the UN, you have Russia with a seat at the Security Council. All of the international systems put in place to stop something like this from happening have not worked. Is the West, to include our White House, capable, should he go even further, or should things go in a certain direction, of wielding what is necessary to justify the infrastructure that exists to defend the West? I mean, do we have it in us to take on a thug should he go even further?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Pete, and it gets at the heart of the challenges we've been facing here and why Putin himself sees the opportunity that he's taken here. I mean, he obviously sees the political and social divisions that exist in Europe and also in the United States. He also looks at the United States as not just about Biden, but he looks at the United States in its entirety, and he looks and says, well, they can't even do their own knitting, so to speak. We have an open border where thugs and criminals and traffickers are rolling through it. We have a crime wave in this country that's at epidemic proportions. They see that as they roll that up, all about American decline, American weakness.
Sure. Absolutely.
And yes, so there are real issues here, Pete, dealing with NATO's resolve. They've got to upgun. They've got to increase the percent of their defense budget, put real capability in Eastern Europe.
That's something that Donald Trump talked about.
The United States should not do. And we shouldn't do all the heavy lifting here.
Amen.
This is mostly about them.
You've done a lot of heavy lifting for us this morning, General. Your window's about to close and we'll lose you, so we have to leave it there. But thank you, as always, for your insight. We appreciate it.